Hey there, you're looking kind of cute. Have you considered subscribing? Let's have some fun. Peabody started when I was 12. Not too early, not too late. My older brother's puberty began with a growth spurt and hair sprouting in all the right places, including his face. He started shaving when he was 16. Mine, however, kicked off with erections and acne. The first part was sometimes pleasant, though unpredictable. Embarrassing when it popped out of nowhere in front of a girl. Not big, but visible. And they usually noticed. I wasn't a pervert. I just didn't have control over it yet. My acne, though, that was another story. It was awful, painful, and stubborn. I washed my face relentlessly, even at school during lunch. Mom suggested it as if I wasn't already doing it, but the mirror never lied. Washing didn't help. It's healthy, the doctor explained during our yearly checkup. Acne is a puberty thing. It will fade when you finish puberty. Girls get it too, he said casually, and I knew Carla from the marching band had it as bad as me, except after Halloween, she didn't. I stared at her in disbelief. How did you do it? She had been given pills by another doctor, she explained, a one-a-day routine that had cleared her skin in a week. My own doctor insisted there was no cure, that it was natural. My dog had said the same thing. Carla just shrugged. Another doctor, another solution, she said matter-of-factly. Handing me the card, I calculated the cost in my head. $50 for a visit, $60 for a 3-year supply of pills, roughly 5 cents a day, almost free. The pills were technically expired, she admitted, but Big Pharma wants you to throw away good medicine and pay again, she reasoned. I survived. I figured I could too. I found Dr. Gonzalez's office on Dorchester Avenue, South Boston. Outside, nothing announced a doctor's office, just a sign with the name. The building looking more like a dusty warehouse than a clinic inside. Stacks of dusty boxes and supplies filled the space, and the place smelled faintly of medicine and old paper. I bought 2 bottles because boys were different and had to take 2 pills a day, minuscule, nearly invisible, yet powerful. I paid nearly $200. No smartphone that year. Maybe Santa would be merciful. 1 pill in the morning, 1 before bed, and in 2 weeks, acne-free. My face was clean as if the problem had never existed, and I had survived. Our family lived in a cramped Boston apartment. I shared a bedroom with my older brother, a frustrating arrangement but temporary. He eventually graduated and was ready for college, leaving me a room of my own, or so I thought. Then, my parents announced we were moving to Alaska. Both scientists, they were ecstatic about new geology opportunities. Their joy was palpable. They showed me pictures of a real 2-story American house with a garage. My school records were already transferred. We packed our essentials and shipped the rest. I would stay with my Uncle Paul in Iowa for a few days before the move. Uncle Paul was also a scientist, living in the middle of nowhere after accepting a lab. His family, my Aunt Margaret and cousins Kinga and Jake, were already settled there. I imagined the week with them as a minor inconvenience, a way station before my new Alaskan life. But the first blow came when my father received a call. The house in Alaska didn't exist yet. It was still in the planning stages. After frantic calls, they arranged storage for our things. My parents left for Alaska the next day, leaving me with only a toothbrush, a change of clothes, my flute, and my acne pills. The rest of my life was in storage. With no money to buy new clothes, I borrowed from Kinga, my cousin, and a tomboy of my own size. Army green shorts, a tight coordinated tee, shorter, tighter than my usual, but I made it work. My cropped hair helped. I didn't look like a girl. Barely. It was strange, wearing someone else's clothes, but the small sense of independence felt oddly satisfying. Kinga and I spent our days wandering Uncle Paul's house, while Jake preferred his friends, leaving the younger cousins to make our own fun. One morning, Jake surprised us with a proposition: help at the Independence Day parade in Dubuque. His high school marching band, football team, and dance squad were participating. Kinga objected. We weren't students there. Jake insisted. Aunt Margaret agreed. The nearest school, West High, needed us to attend. I reluctantly went along, keeping Kinga company. At the parade grounds, kids of all ages gathered in small groups, some leaving the next day, some preparing for the parade. I introduced myself as Sylvester, though in the family I was called Sylvie One Boy. Bob tried to taunt me, mistaking me for a girl. I explained, gesturing to my cropped hair, but it didn't matter. Others laughed. Jake and Kinga said nothing, letting it pass. Teachers soon intervened, sorting us into our roles. I was put aside with Kinga, given a gym uniform in my size, black shorts, a maroon tee with Waterloo West printed across it, tight, skimpy, the kind that left little to the imagination. My nipples poked through. I cursed under my breath. It was hot, awkward, embarrassing. Pantyhose were suggested to manage the chill, bras for coverage. Protection, Kinga corrected. Strange garments for a strange morning. I wrestled with the elastic band of the bra, the unknown sensation over my chest, the pantyhose against my legs. Shaving, too, for the first time. A new experience, weird, neither pleasant nor bad, just different. Aunt Margaret watched approvingly. The parade started. I marched with confidence, using my flute as rhythm, demonstrating turns and swings learned in Boston. The teachers complimented our precision. Aunt Margaret snapped photos, smiles everywhere. But the sun, the layers of clothing, the tight shorts, and my sensitive chest made me acutely aware of my body in a way I hadn't been before. Yet somehow I moved through it all, a strange mixture of embarrassment, pride, and adaptability. I felt out of place and strangely capable, learning fast that appearances were not always what mattered. Movement, rhythm, and attitude counted too. After the parade, Jake disappeared to meet his friends, leaving Kinga and me to change into more presentable outfits for dinner at Olive Garden. Shorts wouldn't do, jeans neither. Skirts, blouses, coordination, presentation. Aunt Margaret's world of order and appearance contrasted sharply with my simple Boston sensibilities. I adjusted, slipped into denim, flannel, pantyhose, and sneakers, resigned to the attention I would get. Once again, the world treated me as a girl, even if I knew better. At 14, puberty had given me sensitivity, awareness, and a new understanding of how others perceived me. Kinga, ever the tomboy, moved comfortably through her own presentation, while I learned that sometimes survival meant compromise. The day ended with a strange blend of normalcy and strangeness, a quiet adaptation to circumstances beyond my control, and the feeling that the next stage of adolescence would bring more challenges, changes, and lessons. The days at my uncle's house passed in a strange blur of routine and adaptation, and by the time our flight to Alaska approached, I had settled into a rhythm that felt foreign, yet oddly comfortable. Kinga remained my anchor, a familiar presence in a household that was otherwise new and intimidating. She flitted around like she owned the place, her short hair, casual demeanor, and tomboy confidence, a mirror of the parts of myself I was still discovering. I, on the other hand, felt every movement, every glance, and every layer of clothing as an announcement of my awkward position in the world, teetering between boyhood and a perception that insisted I was something else entirely. The morning of our departure, Aunt Margaret had insisted on a careful packing of our things, making sure I had more than just clothes, but everything I might need for the early days in a remote Alaskan town. Pantyhose, bras, my flute, anti-acne pills, spare shoes, denim, flannel, shorts, tees. Each item seemed imbued with a strange significance, a preparation not just for travel but for survival in a place where nobody would know me. And yet everyone would have opinions about my appearance. It was like carrying a second skin, one that required constant adjustment and vigilance, and the sensation of putting it all in my suitcase felt almost ceremonial. I packed meticulously, folding each piece of clothing with care, the way Kinga did, and I noticed how much I was learning about her, about presentation, about perception, and about the delicate balance between comfort and societal expectation. For the first time, I understood the importance of layers, not just on the body but on identity itself. On the flight, I stared out the small window at the patchwork of green and brown beneath us, fields giving way to the expanses of forest and the jagged edges of distant mountains. I thought about Boston, about my cramped apartment and the crowded streets, the narrow hallways and the familiar faces I would not see again for a long time. The city had been a cage of familiarity. Alaska promised space, openness, and a sort of terrifying possibility. I wondered if anyone there would know how to interpret my presence, if I would simply blend in as another boy, or if my appearance would continue to invite questions, comments, and assumptions. I squeezed Kinga's hand, and she looked at me knowingly, as though she had anticipated my thoughts before I had even fully formed them. Her quiet confidence rubbed off on me in subtle ways, a reminder that I was not entirely alone in navigating the confusing territory of adolescence. I imagined the first day at my new school, the classroom, the hallway, the inevitable moment someone would mistake me again, the teacher who would call me by the wrong name, the peers who would laugh, the small victories and humiliations that awaited. My stomach churned with a mixture of dread and excitement, a familiar cocktail that puberty had introduced and which I had yet to learn to fully manage. Arriving in Alaska, we were met by my parents, whose eyes gleamed with excitement over the possibilities the new house and landscape offered. The home itself was still partially empty, echoing with unfamiliarity, but the two-story structure with its garage, high ceilings and windows framing the snowy peaks of distant mountains promised a kind of freedom I had never experienced in Boston. I wandered through the rooms, each step producing a slight echo, each corner a reminder that nothing here had yet been claimed by memory or routine. My bedroom, once fully my own after my brother's departure, was now a blank canvas, and the thought of being the first to occupy it in this new place brought an unexpected thrill. I could set up my flute, arrange my clothes, organize my small treasures in ways I had always imagined but never enacted. Yet the excitement was tempered by unease. The familiarity of family, even in their presence, did not erase the anxiety of being observed, of being misjudged, of having my body and its changes constantly under scrutiny. I unpacked carefully, folding my clothes as I had done in Iowa, arranging my pills and toiletries, lining up my shoes, making small, precise decisions to reclaim some sense of agency in a world that had shifted beneath my feet. The first days at school were an exercise in adaptation and quiet observation. I wore my new clothes, practical for Alaska's cooler climate, but still aware of how they framed my body. My chest, sensitive from months of growth, my hair, cropped yet deliberately styled, and my legs, recently shaved and encased in pantyhose on colder days, all drew attention in subtle ways. I walked the halls cautiously, gauging reactions, noticing which glances lingered, and learning to move in ways that allowed me to occupy space without inviting unnecessary scrutiny. Teachers were polite, attentive, yet distant. Classmates curious, some friendly, some indifferent, some openly trying to categorize me. I found solace in music, in playing my flute, the notes carrying me into a world where my body did not define my worth, where rhythm and melody offered a temporary escape from constant evaluation. Kinga, too, adapted quickly, finding friends, carving a niche, and offering me companionship and encouragement, reminding me that the world was navigable with patience, wit, and awareness. Together we navigated the cafeteria, the gym, the halls, discovering where we fit, where we were safe, and where attention was unavoidable. Social dynamics were complicated. Boys occasionally made comments, testing boundaries. Girls were curious, but not unkind. Teachers and staff treated me politely, but with occasional hesitation, unsure how to classify me in forms, in attendance, in routines. Each encounter was a puzzle, a test of my ability to respond without shame, to assert myself without aggression, and to maintain an internal sense of dignity. I learned the art of posture, the timing of speech, the subtle cues that guided perception. I became aware that puberty had endowed me not just with physical change, but with emotional insight, empathy, and an acute understanding of human observation. Acne, which had once dominated my reflection and thoughts, now seemed minor, a small battle already won. My focus shifted toward adaptation, observation, and navigation of a world that was at once new and daunting. Each day brought small victories: a friend who understood me without comment, a teacher who praised my music, a peer who included me in a project without question. These moments, simple as they seemed, became the anchors of my confidence, a quiet reassurance that life could be managed even in unfamiliar circumstances. At home, the rhythm of family life was stabilizing. My parents, consumed with their work, relied on routines and schedules, leaving Kinga and me to create our own small adventures. We explored nearby forests, learned the routes through the neighborhood, and discovered local stores and cafes, building familiarity in a land that initially felt alien. The cold, the snow, the mountains, elements that seemed intimidating, gradually became part of the landscape of our lives, shaping our routines, games, and explorations. I observed the resilience of the human mind, how adaptation softened anxiety, and how small successes in navigation, whether social, physical, or emotional, built the foundation for confidence. I began to see my body as a tool, a vessel through which experiences could be shaped, rather than a constant source of anxiety or embarrassment. Pantyhose, bras, shorts, tees. Tools for navigation, not identity traps. By the end of the first month, the world felt more familiar, though still full of surprises. The lessons of Boston, Iowa, and the weeks of transition had equipped me with strategies for adaptation, awareness, and self-possession. I understood now that puberty was not just a biological process, but a series of negotiations between body, mind, and society, and that learning to navigate those negotiations gracefully was as valuable as any academic lesson. Music, observation, careful presentation, and the support of a trusted companion like Kinga had taught me resilience, patience, and a sense of self that transcended labels. Each day in Alaska reinforced the principle that identity was multifaceted, situational, and mutable, and that confidence was built in small, consistent acts of navigation and assertion. As the weeks passed, I felt a growing sense of mastery over my circumstances, a realization that the world could be engaged on my own terms, that misjudgment, misunderstanding, and awkwardness were not threats but opportunities for learning and self-definition. And so, in this quiet, snowy corner of the world, with mountains as witnesses and family nearby, I stepped into adolescence with eyes wide open, aware of every glance, every layer, every challenge, and every small triumph. I had moved, adapted, and learned. And though the journey was far from over, I understood that confidence, self-awareness, and a measure of courage were the tools I would carry forward, navigating the ever-shifting landscape of puberty, identity, and life itself with resilience, reflection, and a readiness to meet the world on my own terms. The days of uncertainty, embarrassment, and adjustment had given way to competence, observation, and a quiet sense of self-possession that promised not just survival, but engagement, understanding, and even occasional joy in the ordinary, extraordinary life I now inhabited.